Welcome to Brain Injury Speaks, the podcast. Brought to you by Brain Injury Speaks and the Ontario Brain Injury Association. Episode 1, Part 1. Russ shares his personal experience. Welcome to Brain Injury Speaks, the podcast, in affiliation with the Ontario Brain Injury Association. My name is Allison. I work at OBIA as a support service and network advocate, assisting with our Brain Injury Speaks network, projects, and newsletters. This podcast is aimed to exploring stories, struggles, and triumphs of individuals living with acquired brain injuries, as well as providing insights and ideas from experts, advocates, and professionals working to make a difference. Whether you're living with a brain injury or supporting someone who is, this is your podcast to find support, information, and hope. So let's dive in. Trigger warning and disclaimer. Stories shared discuss personal stories related to brain injuries, which may be triggering for some viewers. Any views and opinions shared by guests may not reflect the views and opinions of OBIA. We are very excited to be sharing this podcast in celebration of Brain Injury Awareness Month. We thought this would be an exciting way to bring awareness to brain injury by offering a different method of sharing stories and information with persons with lived experience. So we have Russ here today to share his story and experience of living with a brain injury. Russ has been a continued advocate for persons with brain injuries after sustaining one himself. He is a member of the Brain Injury Speaks Provincial Advisory Team. He started a support group in his area for persons with lived experience and has collaborated on many projects that highlight the importance of having your voice heard to promote hope and awareness. So hello, Russ. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us today.
Hi, Alison. I'm really excited to share my story and hope it brings hope, advocacy, and some awareness to acquired brain injury.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I guess kind of starting just from the beginning, would you be able to share a bit about what you were doing before you sustained your injury?
Sure. I was in retail management. I worked for a large grocery chain here in my area. My job took up most of my time, being on call 24/7. In actuality, it kind of defined who I was at that point in my life. That's who I was. I was the retail manager for a grocery chain.
Absolutely. And how did you acquire your brain injury?
Well, the traumatic brain injury that we're going to talk about today, I sustained during a motor vehicle collision in April of 2009. But my first traumatic brain injury, I was about 9 years old. I had a bike accident and I was thrown off my bike. Didn't have a helmet. My head hit the curb. I was knocked unconscious, taken to the hospital, and the next thing I remember is just waking up in our backyard at home. I've also sustained over 10 documented concussions through my hockey career. So I never really considered my past traumatic brain injuries until I sustained this one from the motor vehicle accident. A little bit more about the motor vehicle accident. I hit a telephone pole. I rolled down an embankment, and somewhere in all that motion or catastrophe, my seatbelt broke.
Oh, wow.
And so apparently the car ended up that it was pointed that the passenger side was on the ground, the driver's side was in the air. And I was on the back passenger seat, like the rear seat of the car.
Oh my goodness.
So it was fun.
And how old were you at the time of the motor vehicle accident?
I was 41. So I have been dealing with my traumatic brain injury for 16 years, roughly.
Wow.
A little over 16 years.
Yeah. And at the time of sustaining your injury, you would say you're the retail manager, kind of settled maybe in your life where you were at the time before then?
Yes. I was definitely enjoying my job.
Mhm.
Even though it was very um, time consuming, um, I worked with a great group of people, um, and I really, really did enjoy what I did. And as well talk about, that was definitely a bad part of my recovery, was losing who I was and having develop the person I am now.
And kind of diving more into that, what would you say were maybe some of the most challenging parts of your recovery, maybe both physically and emotionally?
Um, there wasn't much recovery, I guess, for the first couple months, mostly because of my physical injuries. So when I was able to, I started physiotherapy to treat my physical injuries. And I guess it wasn't, I guess it was about 6 months after starting my physiotherapy and um, my physical recovery, um, that I started my brain injury recovery. Although I've got to say, at first, even if that's 6 months, I kept saying I did not have a brain injury.
Were you mostly just kind of focused on the physical symptoms and thinking maybe that was the only thing that you were going to have to overcome at that time?
Absolutely, it wasn't until around that 6 month mark that I started noticing deficits and different things. But they were going to go away. I truly believed they were just going to go away.
At that time, did you have any sort of kind of guidance maybe about the um, brain injury symptoms you might experience, or was it kind of again more focused physically on that rehab?
At that time, absolutely none. Nothing was really being done about my brain injury. Everything was being focused on my physical rehabilitation, and I mean everything. And as I mentioned at first, I didn't even realize the deficits of my brain injury, and I started to know something was wrong, but at that time, nothing was being done about it.
And was it kind of yourself that had to reach out for that help, kind of noticing maybe some more of the symptoms you're experiencing and having to get help with that?
Actually, no, it wasn't. It wasn't me. It was a friend recommended Joseph Sideropoulos, a lawyer um, who specializes in traumatic brain injury. That's when the ball got rolling. He's the one who realized I needed to. Oh, I needed help. He's the one who put the team together. He's the one that brought in, an OT, an SLP, a speech language pathologist, um, a PSW, an RSW, and set me up with the St. Mike's Hospital with their brain injury clinic. I think OBIA is well aware of Dr. Octorloni and her work with traumatic brain injury. You know, um, and it was at that time that I started my treatment. I was really starting to notice, my short-term memory issues, my speech problems, my mood swings, constant anxiety. It was horrible. Um, Concentration issues, attention span issues. Um, and at that time, then I realized I was having problems even having a conversation with more than one other person. If there was another person involved in the conversation, I couldn't do it. I lost focus. It's hard to explain. It was like
Yeah.
if you were in a group and everybody was talking, the weirdest experience. It was like you just left your body and you were standing beside yourself and just experiencing the conversation instead of being a part of it. You know, and as I said, in my mind, everything was going to be okay, and they kept repeating to everyone that I'll be back to work in 2 weeks.
And around that 2 week mark, were you kind of still maybe adamant about going back and kind of pushing through your recovery?
I think I repeated that for the first 2 years of my recovery. So it would be, I'm coming back to work in 2 weeks. And then a month later, I'm coming back to work in 2 weeks. I'm coming back to work in 2 weeks. And then I started to realize that things were much worse than I originally thought.
It sounds like, yeah, it took kind of a little bit to maybe accept the fact that, yes, you could possibly be having a brain injury and what that might look like and getting different supports and rehab.
I think at that time I accepted that there was something wrong, but I don't think I accepted the fact that I had a traumatic brain injury that might leave me with permanent deficits.
Right.
And early recovery, especially working with the occupational therapist and the speech and language pathologist, at first the tasks are very easy, and I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be okay. I can do this. Yeah. And continued meetings with the St. Mike's head trauma, I'm going to say team.
Yeah.
Because when you go there, you see, Dr. Arcoloni, who's in charge, and then you'll see someone about your behavior and someone about how your speech and language is coming along. I guess it was then working with Dr. Arcoloni that my recovery really started. I had a team in place. As I mentioned, I had my occupational therapist, I had my speech and language pathologist, PSW, RSW, etc. But in my mind, I wanted more. I needed more help than what they were giving me, and I think this is important to anyone who is going through recovery. You need to know that you have the right to change your team.
Definitely.
Find the people that work best for you. I'm a very type A personality, so I needed my team to be that way as well. I used to call my SLP my sergeant major because she knew how to push me further than I thought even I could go afterwards. So if you don't feel that you're progressing at a pace that you should be, or getting the help that you think you should be, change who you're working with.
Was it difficult? I'm not sure. Like if you had to switch teams, was it difficult trying to locate maybe someone that did fit your needs, your professionals a bit better?
Well, again, working with a lawyer, it was a little bit easier. And, I hate to say this, because any head trauma or any acquired brain injury is horrible, but at least being in a motor vehicle collision, I had the best of the best recovery. And you asked if it's hard to change your team. My lawyer took care of all that. If I didn't like the person I was working with, he would get another person from that same rehab team,
right,
or bring somebody else in completely different from outside of where I've been working with. You know, so I think that's a very important fact, though, because once I got my perfect team together, it was then that I really started to move forward in my recovery.
Wow, yeah, it sounds really great. Yeah, that you were able to have someone kind of in your corner advocating for you, making sure you kind of were able to get the team that you were wanting and needing.
Yes,
Um,
wanting and needing is a good point.
yeah.
Because it sounds minimalistic, but at first I couldn't even remember to bring my keys for the house when I would leave for physiotherapy. So I needed, strategies that would work for that. Um, I hate to say this, but I almost burnt down my house 3 times,
Oh my goodness.
leaving things on the stove. So I needed the strategies on how to work with that. And once I got the team that matched my personality and my needs, um, it made my recovery a little easier. And they pushed me past what I thought I could do, especially once I realized I had the deficits I did.
Call OBIA's helpline today. Call 1-800-263-5404. We're here to support survivors, caregivers, and professionals, listen and provide emotional support, make appropriate community referrals, and provide information about brain injuries. You are not alone. Call 1-800-263-5404 today. So what kind of sport, whether it be, family, friends, sounds like you had a lot of merely multidisciplinary team of professionals, was that kind of maybe the most helpful during your recovery process, being able to find that team that worked for you?
Yeah, I would definitely say that it was finding the team that worked for me. You mentioned family. Now, that was very difficult for them because they supported me the best they could as being my family.
Right.
They gave me somebody to turn to, somebody to lean on. But the thing that definitely helped me most in my rehab was my team. And I will say that the one person on my team that helped me the most was probably my SLP.
Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, you think of speech and language pathologist, and they're going to help you with your language, which of course they did, because I had, like I said, conversation problems, word finding issues. I couldn't remember how to write or print again, so I had to learn how to do that. But the speech and language pathologist went way beyond that. She gave me strategies for everyday help. And as I mentioned, I'm a type A personality, so I needed somebody to help me with what I needed next. I wasn't sure. It's hard you don't know what you need next. You got to rely on them to be able to say, okay, you've been able to develop strategies to deal with this problem. Now let's move on to the next problem. And sometimes it's problems that you don't realize, but they see through working with you.
Definitely. So having that, little push and kind of maybe outside perspective to help.
Yeah. As far as friends go, most of them stopped coming around after, I'd say, the 1 year mark. it was very hard for me to make plans and stick with those plans because I wouldn't know how I would feel that day. Making plans for somebody to come over for dinner or whatever, go for coffee. That day I might be too dizzy. I might, you know, I have a problem, and these problems still exist today. And I have a specific problem that I call camera head or camera vision. Um, when I turn my head, Melissa, if you were to turn your head, you see it as a nice, clean movie picture. Okay, you see everything nice and clean. There are some days when, for me, it's my head takes a picture, there's a blank. My head takes another picture, there's a blank, and my head takes another picture, and there's a blank. So the days like
Wow.
that are very difficult to do anything.
Definitely.
So I can't say I blame them because it was hard to stay in contact with them. My friends that were very close friends before the accident are still around today. Um, you know, every brain injury is different. So I guess that goes back to putting together the right team for you. No two brain injuries are alike. Um, so you need to find what works for you. And I think an important thing to mention, like here, we're talking support.
Right.
The one thing that was missing in my recovery was mental health.
Okay. Wow.
To this point, have you heard me say anything about like I had a psychologist or psychiatrist or anything else involved in
No. Yeah.
recovery? So that was definitely one thing that was missing. Um, and I'll be honest with you, about 2 years into my recovery, and we'll talk about this later again, the misconceptions of a brain injury, and even I believed them back then, that at the 2 year mark, well, that's it. I'm not going to recover any further. And I still had a lot of problems. Like, okay, I had strategies to deal with basic life things, but um, at 2 years, there's no way I could sit here and have this conversation with you. And that's when I got very, very depressed. To the point I went into my doctor's office, my family doctor, and I said, I'm having very serious suicidal thoughts. And he advised me to go to one of our local hospitals who had a specialist in mental health issues. Um, she got me into a mental health day program, which involved like group therapy plus private, seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a psychologist. And that was helpful. It was.
Yes.
But it wasn't, they recommended that I take a cognitive behavioral therapy course afterwards. And that changed my life.
Oh, wow. Could you maybe, for maybe listeners that aren't fully maybe aware, could you maybe explain a bit about cognitive behavioral therapy?
Well,
Just maybe
cognitive,
briefly.
sure. Let's talk about the part where I kept saying, at 2 years,
Yes.
I'm not going to improve any further.
And was that a misconception or an idea that was told to you by individuals in the community or rehab specialists or anything like that?
No, that was
Kind of
something
hitting that to my.
that I had just heard over the years.
Okay.
Not something that was specifically said by my rehab team or
Right.
any of the professionals I was seeing. That was just in my mind.
Right.
And during cognitive behavioral therapy, I learned that, that's a negative thought. And it's not a true thought. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of it is learning about, what are our true thoughts against what are these negative thoughts that you have that are false. And these
Yeah.
negative thoughts that are false can really bring you down in your depression. Um, they teach you not, I don't want to say not to let the little things bother you, um, but that if somebody says something that might bother me, um, like before the cognitive behavioral therapy or mental health day course, um, I had massive anger problems.
Okay.
Like if somebody was to bump me in a line, say at the grocery store or something,
Right.
I would just go into a rage. So they would teach me how to deal with that. They teach you a lot of self care, like
Yes.
um, meditation, but meditation means a lot of different things. It doesn't mean that you're sitting on a yoga mat with your legs crossed and you're um, meditation could happen simply by taking a few, or shall I say, using a few breathing exercises that they taught me, so that okay, calm down, take a few. They called it pursed breathing. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but um, they made a big difference in my life.
Wow. And it sounds like, yeah, like with your recovery, you had so many different moving parts, both physically and emotionally, um, logistically with getting different teams um, involved. So, how would you say that you were able to maybe stay positive or motivated throughout your recovery?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't. I wasn't positive or motivated at the beginning, um, mainly because I lacked the knowledge of what an acquired brain injury was. You know, and at the beginning too, as I mentioned, I suffered terrible depression, and that wasn't being addressed. It wasn't until I got and after the mental health day course and after the cognitive behavioral therapy, um, I was, I don't want to say assigned, I was referred um, to a psychologist and to a mental health nurse and one other person, and I can't remember who they were with. Uh, that's all part of a brain injury. Um, uh, After the cognitive behavioral therapy, that's when I started, uh, understanding that set smaller goals um, that were very easy to achieve, and achieving these small steps made things a lot easier for me.
That's great. And when kind of maybe accomplishing the smaller tasks or smaller goals, did that help you kind of keep the
Oh yeah,
momentum going?
absolutely. And as I mentioned, to building relationships with my rehab team, like making sure they knew what I wanted and making sure that they could provide that. Um, and developing to the point where, they know if I'm having a very bad day, not to push me,
Right.
you know. But eventually the smaller goals led to larger goals and more complicated goals. And I guess that's when I actually started my recovery. But you need, and not just your rehab team, you need people around you that are supportive and understanding and caring towards you.
Definitely. I think that's, yeah, a really important message.
That's a big part to staying positive.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you've come, such a long way, talking about your early days of recovery
Yeah.
and kind of where you're at now.
Oh,
Um,
it's two different worlds.
could you maybe share what are some of maybe the proudest moments you've had since your injury and recovery?
I, this is going to sound odd, but one of the proudest moments of my recovery, I think, was actually accepting myself, or allowing myself to accept the fact that I had a traumatic brain injury, and life wasn't going to be the same. Um, that life was going to have a very different future than I had planned, but it was going to be okay. That helped me stay positive. And I guess one of the biggest goals that I wanted to achieve was living a semi-independent life, and I think that was one of my proudest moments when I was, um, able to do that. To I don't want to say live, but to um, see, here we go with the word finding issues. To being able to just live life without 24-hour support. I think that was, once I accomplished that was one of my proudest moments. Um, and I have to say too, getting my driver's license back.
Wow.
That was a big accomplishment. Again, like I said, I was a very independent person before the accident, and it was very hard to accept all the help, and just even friends, family driving me around to different appointments and everything. Once I got my driver's license back and I could do that again, I was achieving this semi-independent lifestyle that I wanted. Um, Definitely another proud moment was when I started the support group, as you mentioned at the beginning. Um, it was actually my SLP's idea. So we contacted my local brain injury association. They had support groups, but they were in the larger areas that they covered. So I thought, well, why not try and start a support group here in my town? And you know, when we started it and realized that, oh my God, like we've got a lot of people here from a small town, and I did that for 5 years,
Wow.
and then I had to step aside. And I'll say I have to step aside because I cared about the people in the support group, and I was starting to carry their problems and issues with me. Um, as I mentioned before, you don't want to say you're lucky to be in a motor vehicle collision, but you receive a lot more care than somebody who just happens to fall down the stairs and hit their head in their own home. They may be out of pocket
Wow.
for
Yeah.
all these therapies. Um, so I heard a lot of things in the support group that I used to carry with me, and after 5 years, it was time to pass it on and let somebody else facilitate it.
Wow. That's a huge accomplishment and yeah, a major goal, even like kind of going back, the semi-independence and getting your driver's license back and the support group. Those are all huge goals for anyone, to accomplish, especially after such a long recovery that you've experienced. That's amazing.
Yeah, and as I said too, that I was not able to return to work um, because of the permanent deficits I have with short term memory, speech, etc. And I understand that. There are a lot of legal reasons that people don't want to employ me. And again, because of the cognitive behavioral therapy, I understand that, and it doesn't make me angry. But I also have to say that working with organizations like yours, the Ontario Brain Injury Association, Brain Injury Speaks, other, and working with other rehabilitation specialists to try and help others living with the effects of acquired brain injury. That really helps stay positive. The idea of trying to help one person maybe get one step further in their recovery by sharing what I've experienced.
Definitely. And I know you mentioned you weren't able to go back to maybe your traditional work, but it sounds like, you're definitely keeping yourself busy and kind of, I know with the Brain Injury Speaks, provincial advisory team, that's a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of effort. Your support group, definitely doing work within, the brain injury community. So that's amazing.
That helps. That helps. Like I said, if I can help just one person, that makes me a little happier.
Thank you for listening to Brain Injury Speaks, the podcast, part 1 of Russ sharing his story. Visit the OBIA website to listen to part 2, where Russ discusses awareness for brain injuries. The Ontario Brain Injury Association is so excited to be presenting the new Brain Injury Awareness Flag. This flag was developed by an individual who themselves have sustained a brain injury. This flag is to help promote awareness and recognition of brain injuries across Ontario.